That campsite wasn't even marked on the map. It was silent. Even the wind seemed uneasy in its shade. And that weekend, a family of 5 went there to camp. They never came back. It began when a group of volunteer hikers stumbled upon a rotting tent, scattered belongings, and a deserted campsite deep within the forest, without a single human footprint in sight. When authorities arrived, there was no blood, no signs of struggle. Everything was in its place. But the people were gone. There were 5 missing. Richard Miller, 48, the father; Dana Miller, 42, the mother; Emily, 15, the older daughter; Noah, 10, the younger son; and Moose, the family's Labrador retriever. The site was located in one of the densest parts of the forest. Satellite images clearly showed the tent, but the thick trees surrounding it made visibility nearly zero just a few steps away. On the first day of the search, not a single clue was found. On the second day, a dog collar, believed to belong to Moose, was discovered roughly 400 meters from the tent. But still, no blood, no tracks, no signs of a struggle. So, what happened to this family? Authorities suggested it may have been a natural disappearance, but no logical explanation could account for the neatly arranged belongings, phones still plugged in, or even the campfire that was still faintly smouldering. As you listen to this story, there's only one thing you need to keep in mind. The family didn't seem to leave on their own, but it's not what they left behind that begins the nightmare. It's what took them. Richard Miller drove with a stern expression, his hands tight on the wheel. In the back seat, the kids, Noah and Emily, sat with their headphones on, each lost in their own world. Dana sat in the passenger seat, glancing at a map, though her mind was clearly elsewhere. This camping trip had been planned for a long time. They needed it. As a family, they had grown distant. Technology, work, school. One by one, these things had built invisible walls between them. Richard saw this trip as a reset, a clean start. And beginnings often seem ordinary, until something goes wrong. By the time they arrived at the site, the sun was setting, and the forest had turned a deep shade of purple. Emily stepped out and mumbled, "Isn't it a little too quiet here?" Dana noticed it too. Not even the sound of birds. It was as if the forest itself had stopped breathing. The campsite was hidden near a lake, tucked behind thick trees at the end of an unmarked path. Richard had learned of it from an old friend who once told him, "A perfect spot, secluded, untouched, no one knows about it." But Richard hadn't spoken to that friend in over 4 years. Why suggest this place now? He still didn't know. The tents went up, a fire was lit. Everything looked normal, at least on the surface. But later that night, Emily saw something. By the lakeshore, behind the bushes, something moved. At first, she assumed it was an animal, but there was no sound, no rustling, no footsteps, just shadows. The next morning, Noah noticed something strange. His backpack had been moved. "Backpacks don't move on their own," he said. Had he sleepwalked? Richard hadn't slept at all that night. He kept hearing a low hum, like a distant vibration in the trees. Dana dismissed it. "You're exhausted. It's all in your head." But that night, there had been no wind. Not a single branch stirred. The next day, they set out for a short hike. A fire lookout tower was marked on the old map. They thought it'd be a good viewpoint, and maybe a chance for phone signal. But something was off when they reached the tower. The door was hanging open. Inside, it was a mess. The wooden stairs appeared broken, and carved into the wall, a single line etched deep into the wood. August 7th, 1999. They're listening. Richard brushed it off as a prank, but Dana went pale. She had read about that date once, an old newspaper clipping. A family had vanished in this same area, just like they were now. That night, No one spoke around the fire. Only silence remained. And within that silence, sometimes a snap, sometimes a shadow, sometimes nothing at all. And yet, it felt like everything. Emily wrote in her journal, "This place is beautiful, but something's wrong. It feels like someone is watching us." From that moment on, this would no longer be a camping trip. It would become a fight for survival. Richard woke at first light and noticed Dana's tent flap hanging open. Inside, no one. Her shoes were still there. She hadn't even taken her jacket. At first, he thought she'd gone for an early stroll by the lake. But hours passed, and there was still no sign of Dana. They scoured the forest, calling her name. Emily sobbed. Noah stayed silent, eyes darting across the trees. Finally, on the path that led to the lake, Richard found a scarf. It was Dana's. But on the fabric lay a strange symbol. An eye enclosed within a triangle. He couldn't make sense of it. Yet down by the shoreline, the second shock awaited. Dana's footprints ended at the water's edge, as if someone had dragged her in. The lake was shallow, the surface perfectly still. Even the mud hadn't stirred. That night they crowded into one tent for safety. Richard rose every hour, circling the camp, listening for any sound, any clue. But there was only silence. A deep, bone-numbing silence. Around 3 a.m., Emily's breathing changed. She spoke in her sleep. Mom, are you there? What's behind the light?" Richard jolted upright, shaking her awake. Emily's eyes stared through him. "Dad, there's a light, but Mum isn't there." Then she drifted back to sleep. At dawn, Noah was gone. He'd slept beside Emily. Now only emptiness, no footprints, none of his things missing. Just a stone, and etched upon it, the same symbol, the triangle, and the eye. Richard ran through the forest for hours, shouting until his voice shredded. No answer. Desperate, he bolted toward the old lookout tower, hoping for a clue. But the tower no longer stood. In its place lay scorched, broken beams. Among the ashes he found a tin box. Inside, an old tape recorder, still ticking. He pressed play. A muffled male voice crackled out. 1999. The same cycle. "I saw them, not shadows, imitators. We're not a family anymore. In the dark, I saw my own face. My own voice gave the orders." Richard couldn't comprehend it, except for one terrible certainty. Dana and Noah had not left of their own free will. That night, Emily spoke only once, staring up at the sky. "Something's coming, but it still doesn't know who it is." The words froze Richard's blood. They were the exact last words spoken by the missing children of 1999, the case he'd read about in that old newspaper. Same words, same place, same darkness. And at first light, Emily was gone too. Day 2, early morning. Jake awoke to an unfamiliar hush. Most mornings he followed the smell of coffee to find his mother, Lisa, tending the campfire. Today, no smell, no sound. He stepped outside. His eyes slid to the spot where his parents' tent should have been. The tent was gone. Completely. No fabric, no gear, nothing but damp soil scarred by faint scorch marks. At first he thought it was a prank, until he noticed half a fork stabbed into the ground, like a warning. But a warning of what? Ellie was still asleep. Rather than wake her, Jake took a quick circuit of the nearby trail. After 100 meters, he realized the footprints in the mud weren't theirs. They were larger, heavier, sinking deep into the wet earth. Pine needles should have muffled every step, yet each time Jake moved, he felt something shift behind him. When he returned to wake Ellie, the tent was still there, but Ellie was not. Panic hit. "Ellie!" he shouted, sprinting into the trees. No answer, no footsteps, not even a familiar breath. Then he spotted her t-shirt on the ground, the one she wore yesterday. It was dry, though the night air had been thick with dew. That meant it had been dropped moments ago. Just then, a rustle rose from the wet soil. Jake stepped back, flicking on his pocket flashlight, aiming between the pines. What stared back wasn't human. For several seconds it didn't move, eyes fixed on him, body rigid. Jake bolted. A branch caught his foot. He crashed to the ground. As he crawled, he saw a note half buried in the dirt. "We warned you not to stay past the second night." The paper was weathered, but the ink was fresh. Jake's thoughts raced. Who? Why? Where were Mum, Dad, Ellie? A strange bell rang deep in the woods, raising every hair on Jake's body. It sounded like a camp bell, yet the rhythm felt wrong, mechanical, precise. Tack, tack, tack. Silence. Then again, faster. Tack, tack, tack. Jake tried to resist, but his legs seemed pulled by an unseen force. The trail led to an abandoned lookout tower. The door was chained shut, the links furred with moss, as if untouched for years. Yet bright drops of blood dotted the chain. Fresh, an hour old at most. Jake couldn't bear it. He ran back to camp. Ellie was still missing, and now his own tent had been stripped, contents gone. Only one thing remained, his father's camera. It was still recording. With trembling fingers, Jake pressed play. The screen showed the dark tree line. Then suddenly, a naked man, skin smeared with mud, stepped into frame. Clutching a sharp object, he carved something into the ground. He turned toward the lens and smiled. Jake's breath caught. That man was the loner camper who had pitched a tent beside them the day before. Day 2. Late morning, Jake ran from the campsite at full speed. All he had was the camera, and the darkness it had captured. His mind swirled with questions, none with answers. The forest was silent, too silent. It felt like the trees themselves were holding their breath, watching. Suddenly, a scream. Close. It was Ellie. Jake turned, sprinting toward the sound. As he pushed through a narrow gap in the trees, his foot caught on a rope. He fell, landing hard in the mud. But this wasn't just a root or branch. It was deliberate. A trap. As he pulled himself up, his fingers touched something cold and metallic. He clawed it from the earth. An old key. Rusty letters were barely visible. Ridgepoint Facility, Sector C. The words hit Jake like a punch to the chest. Ridgepoint? That was the name of a government research site, officially shut down in 1983. His grandfather used to talk about it obsessively. Conspiracy theories about missing people, cover-ups, experiments. Jake had never believed him, until now. Then came the whispers. Not screams this time, whispers. His name. Jake. Jake. Come back. Jake. They weren't just in his ears. They twisted the rhythm of his heartbeat. Gripping the key, Jake pressed on. A few hundred meters deeper, he found a rusted door hidden behind thick brush. The sign above it had faded with sun and age, but beneath the rust, words emerged. Ridgepoint. Emergency access. Jake turned the key. The lock groaned and the door creaked open. Inside was total darkness. He stepped forward and the door slammed shut behind him. There was no going back. A staircase led downward. Each step echoed with a hollow clang of metal. Jake switched his camera to night vision. At the end of the corridor, a flickering light pulsed like a heartbeat. As he moved toward it, he saw strange symbols carved into the walls, a fusion of tribal markings and complex equations. Who would draw something like this? A low hum drew him to one of the rooms. He pushed open the door and froze. Massive screens, old monitors, and in the center, a glass capsule. Inside it, his mother, Lisa. She looked asleep, but her face was streaked with dried mud and wires trailed from her arms. Her eyes fluttered open. She saw Jake, but her mouth wouldn't move. He stood paralyzed. Then a voice, A man's voice, calm and steady. "We finally got you here." Jake turned. It was the loner camper, but now he wore a white lab coat. "My name is Dr. Weller. Your family, they were just subjects. But you, Jake, you're the anomaly." Jake stepped back. "What are you talking about?" Dr. Weller walked into the shadows and snapped his fingers. Panels on the walls slid open. Dozens of people, all in capsules, all awake, none able to speak. "We've been running this site since 1984. Neurological trials, experiments in consciousness. We selected your family because their past was already tied to this system. It started with your grandfather." Jake's heart pounded. "What are you saying?" "He worked here, Jake, and he was the only one who ever escaped." Jake's voice cracked. "Where's Ellie?" Weller smiled. "Your sister works with us now. You'll see." The back door opened. Ellie stepped out. But her eyes, they were wrong, vacant. "Hi, Jake," she whispered, in a voice not her own. Jake wanted to scream, but his throat was dust. It was all a trap. The camping trip, the friendly strangers, the vanishing tents. Every step had led him here. Dr. Weller's final words echoed in the cold air. "Your mind is the last piece, the one that completes the system. And now, there is no exit." After that day, Jake, Ellie, and the rest of their family were never seen again. But deep within that forest, on nights when the air stands still, a strange sound is sometimes heard. Tack, 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 the ringing of a camp bell, still waiting